Lord. Hello, everybody. Okay. How's everyone doing? You can unmute yourselves. You can interact with us in the chat. You can react. Amazing. Farron, can I ask that you help me let people in? Are you able to see the notifications?
Have you made me co-admin, because I don't?
Give me 1 sec.
Okay, just make me co-admin and then I got you. I'll be able to add people.
I see. I don't think it lets us do that, or I don't know how to do it. I see some hands up. Please feel free to unmute yourself and share a little bit about where you're calling from. Add in the chat as well, where are you joining us from? I know there's probably some from Lusaka, from Toronto, from Nigeria. Let us know where you're calling from. Aaron, give me 1 second as well.
Sure.
To add as a co-host. There we go. Perfect. You should be able to let people in now.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Amazing. So we will start officially in a couple of minutes. I'm just gonna let everyone join in. We're at 35 people now. We're expecting about 250 people. So at 10:05 CST, which is about 12:05 Eastern Standard Time, we can begin. In the meantime, folks, how are we doing? I'm going to start with an introduction about myself. So my name is Justina Kanza. I am the founder and program director and executive director at Okwera Academy, which is a career accelerator, we call it, that's targeted towards helping people find roles and other resources and community and capital that they need to build and scale their career. So our programming involves what we call Explore, where we help folks, particularly Black folks of African descent in Africa, but also in Africa's diaspora, because I am based in Toronto, Canada. And so what we do is we help you explore different career paths by bringing in folks that are doing the careers that you'd like to get into. So we expose you to what are some potential roles you can take on in tech. What does entrepreneurship look like through sessions like this with and then we have what we call Validate, which is essentially once you've decided that this is a career path that you want to take, say entrepreneurship as a career path, how do you validate that that is indeed what you want to do and that you have the skills and resources to do that? So we do that through giving you capital to acquire the skills needed or to launch a business, so you can validate if entrepreneurship is for you or not. And then our last and I guess top program is Elevate, where we help you then elevate your leadership. How do you go from just being a founder to being a CEO to being on board of director and things of that sort? So that's me in a nutshell. But I want us to interact. This is not going to be me or Michael or Farron speaking at you. This is going to be a very interactive session. So feel free at any point to unmute yourself if you have a pressing question, or alternatively, I'll be monitoring the chat. So you can find the chat, depending on what device you're using, at the bottom right of your screen. And so just drop something in the chat. So I'm going to start with, tell us where you're calling from, right? Tell us where you're calling from. Are you calling from Zambia? Add in the chat below, and let's get interacting as we wait for folks to join us. Chimuela, guys, Chimuela. Where are we calling from? I see Gloria from Lusaka, lots of folks from Zambia. I love to see it. I love to see my Zambians kuchalo. Amazing. Oh, Malawi. We have Malawi in the house. We have the USA. That's beautiful. I'm yet to see anyone from Toronto. Lots of Zambians in the house.
Hi, Justin. I'm just driving.
Amazing, amazing. Thanks for joining us. Didier is one of the founders that went through our programming at Black Founders Network in Toronto. Alistair from Toronto as well. Love to see it. I see Salifianji from Dartmouth and what's NH, USA, one of the states in the USA. Chililabombo, Zambia. Beautiful, beautiful. Amazing, amazing. Okay, okay. I love that we have representation from different parts of the world, and that's very exciting. I think we're going to have questions that are tailored to different positionalities, and I'm looking forward to it. And so, jumping right into it, I think I've given a brief overview of what my organization, Okwera Academy, does. I'll put some links in the chat for those that want to join our community. It's open to everyone. What you do get as part of the community is access to mentors across the globe. You get access to resources. Every Friday, we share directly to your inbox funding opportunities, global job opportunities, events that you can attend, scholarships that you can apply to. So lots of value there. But we're not doing this by ourselves. This is a co-hosted initiative with our lovely friends from Bongo Hive. So I'll call upon Farron to introduce Bongo Hive, what they do, and kind of take it from there. Over to you, Farron.
All right, good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us. And thank you once again to Okwera Academy for just allowing us to be partners. We're super excited to be part of this conversation. Like she said, my name is Farron Kudzai Sakopanya. I am the Digital Communications and Community Associate at Bongo Hive. Now, Bongo Hive is a tech and innovation hub, Zambia's first tech and innovation hub, actually. We've been in existence for about 13 years. And what we do is three pillars. We provide entrepreneur support. So what that looks like is through the various programs that Bongo Hive has, we partner with different organizations to provide support to entrepreneurs. That looks different with each program, but each of our programs allow us the opportunity to help validate and grow businesses. We work with businesses from ideation stage all the way up to growth stage, right? What we want to do is build high growth ventures that serve the underserved markets. And that's what we're really big on. We offer consultancy services as well. What that looks like is we offer tech innovation and entrepreneurship support to larger organizations. We take the culture of innovation and build digital platforms for organizations to be able to create new products and services and just really foster that culture in their organizations. And lastly, we offer co-working space. If you're in Zambia right now, one of the biggest issues is electricity, right? And what we do is, and we understand that electricity is a big thing for a lot of entrepreneurs. We offer co-working space. We have different packages for different entrepreneurs. And what we do is we offer 24 hours of power. The space is open 24/7, right? We offer security, we offer high-speed internet, we offer a good kitchen, and all you just need to do is just come and work. And because we've got different packages, we have a package that suits different people, including a package for those who just want to work at night. So yeah, that's basically what Bongo Hive does. I will add a link in the chat that you'll be add to our website so you're able to read a bit more about who we are and what we do. But yeah, thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Farron, and I highly encourage anyone who's in Lusaka. I know when I'm in Lusaka, I'm hanging out at Bongo Hive. So if you're in Lusaka, I highly recommend. They're doing some really great work there. I see a hand raised from Musharraf, or hot space for you, Musharraf. Please unmute yourself. Okay, perhaps that was an accidental hand raise. But we have in the chat the Bongo Hive link if you want to learn more about what Bongo Hive does. We also have the Okwera Academy link if you want to join the community and learn more about what we do as well. But without further ado, let us get to what we actually came here for. So we have the amazing Michael Moyo, who is a Zambian founder based in the US, particularly now in Silicon Valley. So he's the founder of many organizations, but more notably Ocular AI, and they got into Y Combinator, which is one of the most prestigious accelerators in the world, where they received about 500,000 US dollars. And if you're counting in Kwacha, that's way over 5 million Kwacha in funding. And so, Michael, I know I have a lot of questions. I know we discussed about the flow of this, conversation being a bit more interactive. But before I get to other pressing questions that I have, and then open the floor up to the audience to ask you questions, how are you? Tell us a little bit about yourself, and thank you for making the time today.
Thanks a lot, Justina. Yeah, I'm doing great actually. I'm actually in Silicon Valley right now, San Francisco, California. So it's one funny thing about San Francisco is that it can be very sunny but very cold as well. It's just kind of like an oxymoron. You don't get that in Zambia, right? Like in Zambia when it's hot, it's like sunny, you know. But yeah, I'm doing great. I'm Michael Moyo. I'm originally from Lusaka, Zambia. I'm currently CEO and co-founder of Ocular AI. We just got out of Y Combinator. In addition to raising $500,000 from Y Combinator, we raised an additional undisclosed millions of dollars from VC firms, some of the top VC firms in the world, and over Silicon Valley, valuing the company over $20 million. We're building AI, generative AI for large enterprise companies, and deploying this into some of these, large enterprise companies that have very sensitive data. So pretty much B2B software and service products. Yeah, I'm just really excited about this. Would you like me to go further into my Zambia stuff?
Yeah. No, I have a lot of questions for you, but first, I didn't even know that there was additional funding, which was undisclosed, that you guys received. So congratulations on that. I'm glad to see so much scaling so quickly and so much validation of the amazing work you're doing on Ocular, but also the amazing work that you have done personally in the journey leading up to Ocular, right? Because it just didn't happen overnight. There's been a lot of lessons along the way. So take us back to your background in Zambia. Where did you grow up? Which schools did you attend? And what led to your journey to join an Ivy League university in the US? Because I want for people to kind of understand and relate your positionality and recognize some neighborhoods and schools that even we might have gone to together. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks a lot, Justina. Well, so I actually grew up in Lusaka, Zambia. I was born in Kawe. I grew up in a place called Livala. I don't know if you guys know where Livala is. It's right near Kawata and like between Kawata and Chilenge. I was raised by my mom's young sister, so it's a very fortunate experience. But I wasn't raised by both my parents. But yeah, just pretty modest family. I went to school at Mumuni Basic School. That was my first school. I never went to nursery school. But I think I remember I could read a newspaper when I was like 3 or 4, something like that. I was pretty interesting, weird kid. And then I ended up going to David Kaunda in boarding school. Got really an amazing chance to meet some of the smartest people on the planet, I would say, because I met some of them here in the USA. After David Kaunda, I think that what was actually interesting is, when you graduate in high, like from high school in Zambia, and like when you get like a 6 points and like your straight ones, I was fortunate to have that. The default path is that you're going to become a doctor in the University of Zambia. And I remember my family was debating whether I should go to USA or like China. And I didn't want to go to any of those. And I remember applying to China for like once or twice, something like that. It kept on getting rejected, thankfully. And then, because typically, when you graduate from high school in Zambia, you take like 1 or 2 gap years. And I wanted to come to the USA, so I was telling my parents, I was like, I want to go to the USA because I think that I should go to the USA. My friends are going to the USA because I'd see my friends going to like Ivy League schools like Princeton and Harvard, and I was like, oh, maybe I should actually do that. And like the kind of reaction that I got back home was not really the reaction that I was expecting. Like people like, what, like going to the USA? Like, what are you doing? Like what's that? And so I remember I was actually forced to apply to the University of Zambia, and I got my acceptance from the University of Zambia, the School of Natural Sciences, with the intention to go and study medicine. And I remember when I see that form, I got it and I ripped it off and I threw it under my bed. Don't do that. But my parents were so furious. Like, what's going on with this guy? Like, is everything okay? Is there like some wizardry involved or something like that?
Mhm.
So clashed a bit, and then I ended up leaving my parents' house and moved into a one-room house with a friend of mine. His name is Peniel. He was pretty much in the same position with me. He was trying to go to the USA, and he is actually from Serenge. So we moved into a one-room house near Apex, and we're working for a company called ZISD. I don't know if you guys know ZISD, Zambian Institute for Sustainable Development. They teach like SATs. So we were very fortunate. We got SAT jobs. I was teaching SATs before I came to the USA, and we ZISD helped like sponsored my SATs, first SAT that I took, trying to apply to the USA. I think before going to ZISD, actually, I'd actually tried to apply to the USA once, and I was super unprepared. Like I had like horrible SAT scores. Like pretty much, I didn't know what I was doing. Really, like
I remember those SATs. I remember how challenging they were. I'll just interrupt you really quickly, Michael, and say to folks, I know I'm seeing so many reactions. People are laughing at your story of tearing out your results and throwing them under the bed. And so if there's any questions that come up as Michael is sharing his stories, I want for us to add them in the chat so that we can make it interactive, so that we're all having a conversation with Michael. So Michael, please feel free to continue and segue with us into how once you got to the Ivy League school in the US, what that transition was like, and what sparked your interest in entrepreneurship. But then I also see a question in the chat, someone asking how old you are. If you're okay sharing that, I know that's sometimes personal information.
yeah, no problem. I'm very young. I'm like in the 20s, like pretty much mid 20s, below that. So,
Perfect. Amazing. Yeah. No, please, Michael, go on.
yeah, absolutely. So like where was I? I was talking about the
Your SATs, yes.
okay. I think I should probably focus on this.
Sorry, I've got you in
notifications.
the chat. Don't worry.
But yeah, so we got a chance. Like ZISD, like was like, okay, you guys are pretty smart. We're going to sponsor your SATs. You should teach SATs. I was like, okay, let's do it. But the SATs were some of the most humbling tests I've written in my whole life. Like I got straight ones, like 6 points from David Cowan. I thought I was smart. I took the SATs. I was like, holy cow! Like this is crazy. Like I'm gonna die.
Yes.
So the very humbling experience. But look, I think I got a chance to do so many things at ISD. Some of the people that I actually taught SATs went on to go to very prestigious schools like Princeton, Columbia, Dartmouth, Stanford, like some really amazing people. And obviously, I got a chance to get into Dartmouth, which is an Ivy League school in the USA. And the reason I wanted to come to an Ivy League school in particular is because I knew that if I was come to the USA, I needed to be on full ride scholarship, simply because number one, it costs a lot. It's like Dartmouth costs over $100,000 a year, right? Like that's a lot of cash. And like also looking at where I was coming from and the position I was in, where I was actually arguing with my parents that I wanted to come to the USA, I knew that I had to get a full scholarship, right? And yeah, so I applied to like Harvard, I got listed at Harvard, year one UPenn, ended up getting a full ride scholarship to Dartmouth. So I was really excited, really got fortunate to get into an Ivy League school. But yeah, so when I came to Dartmouth, my goal was to become a doctor. And just give you a little bit of background information, when I was at DK, my friends used to call me Neuron because I was like a biology guy. And like I used to participate a lot in like jets and like Olympiads. Took some really competitive Olympiads. And when I was like grade 12, I'd read like all these like crazy like medical like biology books and everything. And I'd move around talking about like biology terms. And like people would be like, what the hell is going on with this guy? And like, people used to call me Neuron. So I was like, I'm going to become a doctor, And my uncle still calls me Professor Neuron, but I don't know if I'll be able to get a PhD. But when I came to Dartmouth, my goal was to become a doctor. And so I was like, okay, I think I should study pre-med. But I knew that I didn't want to become like a traditional doctor, right? Like I think that would have been boring on my side because, I was very like curious. I wanted to build stuff. So I was like, I should maybe become like an engineer and doctor at the same time. That's gonna be an amazing combination, right?
Interesting.
But I think I underestimated just how intense that would be at Dartmouth. But anyway, I ended up majoring in like biomedical engineering, computer engineering, and pre-med. So pretty much, I'm a double engineer. I'm a computer and biomedical engineer by training. Yeah, studied pre-med and also did a global health minor at that.
That is exciting. I honestly give kudos to anyone who can study anything like scientific, anything that is very technical, because it can be quite complex. So kudos to you for stacking up a lot of those different engineering degrees in addition to the medicine side of things. But also what I'm hearing in your story, which I think is very profound and very important for anyone considering the entrepreneurship route, is sometimes it can be a long journey. You need to know what you want and you need to stick with it and advocate for it. For you, it went to the extent of even like having to leave your parents' house because you had this vision of this is what I've been called to build, right? And so I want to go into how you then started building these different ventures, because it's very clear from very early on that you were very entrepreneurial, right? You know what you want, but then you went on to Dartmouth and you built 3 startups. It was 4 startups actually before Ocular, right? And a lot of stories that we hear with entrepreneurs before they have the one big startup that blossoms and gets funding, there's a lot of sometimes failure preceding that. There's a lot of trial and error. So tell us about the 3 startups that you built. That was Mentor, Liberty Foundation, Hype, and Queer. So how did you balance building 3 startups while doing all of these very challenging academic responsibilities? And what are the lessons that you learned from that have now helped you as you're building Ocular?
Yeah, well, it's very interesting actually that part of the whole journey of being an entrepreneur is just like being super stubborn, and like there's like lots of failure in that. Like if you don't, I mean, somehow you actually need to embrace failure, right? Like if you're actually scared of failing, like it's really hard for you to do anything, pretty much, because you're gonna fail a lot. Like you're actually gonna fail a lot. Like even in engineering, right? Like every time we make something, there's always like a tolerance interval that we add to a particular type of machine or whatever. Like there's a plus or minus thing, right? Like you need to have that tolerance, right? So it don't really work ideally. So like failure is actually real. But look, when I went to Dartmouth, right, like, okay, I'm gonna be a doctor and engineer, right? I was very interesting kid, and I kept asking my professors. I was like, like, yeah, like, I want to become an engineer and a doctor. And I remember this professor was like, what? Like, you're doing engineering and pre-med? Like, are you crazy? And I'm like, yeah, I want to do it. And so I started doing research because, at that time I was still trying to validate whether I actually wanted to become a doctor, right? So I joined this research lab and we were doing some really complicated biochemistry research. We were doing like some protein structure research. I got a chance to work on some of the proteins that are actually involved in like mitochondrial degradation. The mitochondria is like the powerhouse for the human cells. So I got a chance to work on those like very sophisticated things on a very, very deep level, so like atomic level. And that was some really interesting time. But like, I didn't really find joy in that. It was like some really interesting stuff. And so I was like, maybe I should actually try to get an internship. So I ended up getting an internship at Novartis, which is like one of the biggest, pharmaceutical companies in the world. They've produced drugs such as Coartem. I know lots of Zambians are familiar with Coartem. It's like a malaria drug. And I went to Novartis. It was a very interesting time. Like everyone talks about chemistry, like during lunch. It's a very interesting place. It was a very interesting time. I ended up doing 2 projects when I was there. I was like the only intern doing 2 projects. I was like so hard on myself. But I had a great time. Like it was such an amazing and very intense time that I ended up hating it. Like I think I put in so much work, I ended up hating it. And so when I came back from Novartis, I started questioning, like, do I really actually want to become like a doctor? Like like I knew that I was getting the good grades, but like I wasn't actually enjoying it, right? And like I wanted to make impact. So I decided to take some global health classes. I took this geography class called Global Health and Society at Dartmouth. And what was really interesting about that class is that, and I'm going to segue into the startup because this is part of the story.
Mhm.
is that we were building sort of like solutions, some of the most pressing problems in the world. Um, and so in this class, you'd be like part of a team of like different students, like creating solutions. And I was fortunate to be part of like this 3-person team, and we were trying to build like some solution to purify water in Yemen.
Mhm.
Yemen is like water, and the issue is that that the sewer lines or like the water purification system was actually down, and we had to create a solution that would actually purify water and give them like clean water, right? Um, but I think what was really interesting about that, what really stood out to me, is that we not only like applied like technological frameworks and everything, we also put into consideration some of the political factors, some of the global health frameworks in designing that solution. And I was super amazed. I was like, you could actually think about so many factors and like produce something that can actually impact like millions of people. And I think I remember telling my professor, I was like, I actually want to do something like this in Zambia. Like, I want to create a nonprofit in Zambia. My professor was like, you should actually do it. Um, so I think that was actually like summer.
Mhm.
Uh, Ended up calling some friends of mine from the USA and like Turkey and like Zambia, and then we ended up founding this nonprofit called the Mental Liberty Foundation, and that was actually during COVID. So we founded the organization on Zoom. Right? um, but I think that what was really interesting about that is that I took so many midterms and exams at Dartmouth, and I thought that I was geared up to run a nonprofit, but that was like a crazy experience because like everything, like when you're running a nonprofit, everything just breaks down. Everything is literally breaking down. Like
Yes.
like there's no money, there's no this, man. Like this person is like, oh, this like it's like very cumbersome process. Um, but I think that we did some really, really, really cool stuff with the Mental Liberty Foundation. We ended up impacting over 100,000 youths in Zambia through online and in-person outreach programs. Uh,
Mhm.
we raised $15,000 from Dartmouth. We used that money to create Zambia's first ever mental health curriculum.
Curriculum.
Yeah, that we tried to push into uh, high schools in Zambia. But
That
when I
is
went,
such a beautiful story, Michael. I want to pause there because you've touched on something that's coming up in the chat just now. So, absolutely aligned. But I want to highlight a few things that you've mentioned about your story. One, you've mentioned adaptability, right? Being able to adapt to COVID and run a business during COVID. You've mentioned something that every founder needs to have in them, which is resilience and grit. Because startup life, running any organization is no easy feat. And you talk about the different things that come up and having to wear multiple hats, right? So that is very important. But you've also talked about something that I think is very valuable, especially in the context of building ventures as Africans and building ventures that also solve problems that are going on in our communities, which is aligning innovation and impact. So as much as you were doing all the tech stuff, as much as you were doing work that was very even like scientific, your goal was always, how do I make this impactful? And you brought that back home with the Mental Liberty Library, the Mental Liberty Foundation, and then you build this curriculum that's the first of its kind that's been distributed in Zambian schools, and you get about $15,000 from Dartmouth. And it's not easy to get money from anyone. It's not easy to get people or institutions to part with their money, but it comes up a lot with how you communicate and pitch your idea. So I know Xavier is asking in the chat, he says, how are you, so his question board is on communication. Over the years, how have you developed that quality to communicate effectively and pitch your ideas brilliantly? And that's seen in the funding that you've gotten from Dartmouth, but also in the funding that you've gotten from Y Combinator and the millions of funding that you've gotten from other VCs. What's the key item there when it comes to communicating and pitching your ideas?
well, I mean, this is where you have to play reverse engineering, right?
Mm.
Like, like you want to put yourself in a position and say, okay, if I was the founder, what would I like to see, right? Like, like what am I really interested in, right?
Mhm.
Like, I think that the moment you start thinking about that, now you can see that is what I'm talking about really making sense from a funding perspective, right?
Mhm.
And also it depends. Like, there's two types of investors, like impact investors and like venture capitalists, right? Like, impact investors are just really interested in like impact, like how big could this be, right? Like we talk about mental health curriculum, like how many high schools in Zambia? Like how many schools in Zambia, right? Like millions of youths know that would potentially be impacted, right? And I was telling the founders, I was like, look, if you give me $10,000, I am going to impact everyone in Zambia. Like I'm gonna do that. This guy, like even though you wouldn't probably do that, but like they could basically see that you're like a daredevil or something, someone. And like I think that being able to communicate that is really good because it just shows that you're super resilient and you're like super ambitious. From a venture capital perspective, it's all about making money, right? Like what venture capital people care about, like what do the LPs care about, right? Like they want to make money. So it's all about how big could this be? And I think that something that people really tend to, I think that I've seen this a lot from my Zambian colleagues, is that there's a lack of domain expertise. Like you should have domain expertise. Like in my case, Mental Liberty Foundation, as a global health guy, so like damn it, I was doing that stuff. With Y Combinator, like I worked at Microsoft, I was building like some really sophisticated infrastructure there. So like you have the domain expertise and you also have like the education. And I think this is where I think that I've seen lots of talk about people saying, oh, do you actually really need to go to school to become like a business person or whatever? I think that you actually need to go to school because you need to have that domain expertise, especially when you're thinking about venture scale businesses, right? Like if you're selling like Salaula, for instance, like thrift shop, like you probably don't need that. Like you probably don't want to scale that. Like, but when you're talking about like a real scaling, like scaling beyond Zambia and like scaling globally, you need to have that expertise and you need to accumulate that in a very sophisticated, so many ways, I guess.
Absolutely. Okay, so that is again brings up a lot of questions for me. So I'll go through those, and I see Chance's hand is up. So Chance, I'll yield it to you in a second. And so you say a few things there. You say one, you have to play like reverse psychology almost, and put yourself in the shoes of investors, whether that's VCs, whether that's private equity, whether that's impact funders, and say what would I like to see in a founder. And so when you're role playing, what are the characteristics that come to mind when you say, okay, now Michael, I am a VC firm. What do I want to see in a founder that I'm investing in? What are the answers that you're coming up with? So I'm asking this because I want the founders in the room to kind of get an idea of the characteristics that go into being an entrepreneur that is fundable. Because like you mentioned, yes, they're funding the venture, but a lot of times they're also funding and investing in the person. So what answers come up for you when you ask that question?
Yeah, absolutely, right? Like, because, I do enjoy invest as well. But the thing is that, like, number one, I think that what really worked for me in particular is that, like when I applied to Y Combinator, right? Like this dude built like startups while he was in college, right? Like it shows you like this person can build, right? Like in college and like at Dartmouth, at a very intense school. Like if you actually leave Dartmouth, what would you actually build? But the point of highlighting that is that you need to build up credibility somehow. Like get your hands dirty, like try to do some projects or whatever, like keep trying, because then you'd go in a meeting and say, look, I actually tried to build this and this is the experience, this is what I learned, right? And like you're showing like your leadership skills as well. At the same time, I think that investors like to see ambitious people. Like they want the next Bill Gates, right? Like they want the next Jeff Bezos or like the next Mark Zuckerberg. And like you go there and you're telling them that I'm just gonna build this business and I'm gonna scale it all the way. I'm just gonna scale it to Kitwe or like Kawe. Like they want you to like talk about like I'm gonna impact like 1.6 billion Africans. Like now we're talking, right? Like they want to like see that ambition, right? But it's very interesting that got this from Y Combinator is that one of the reasons startups fail a lot is because of founders giving up. So like you should actually exhibit sort of like a tendency to not give up at all, whether it's your like in my case, like I knew I wanted to come to the USA and my parents were like, what are you doing? And I was like, okay, I'm gonna move out of your house, so so showing sort of like that resilience, right? Like knowing what you want. And in most cases, entrepreneurship is that not everyone is going to actually understand your vision. Like when I quit my job at Microsoft, and I was telling my mom this, and she was like, "What? Like, what's going on? Like, what's happening?" Right? Like somehow you actually need to really understand where you're going and like not everyone is going to understand what you're trying to do.
Mhm.
But I think the point is that can you actually tell people and say like, I want you to be part of this journey. Like you should join. If you don't join, you're gonna miss out. And like to be part of like great stories, right? So you being able to communicate that.
Yeah, and that's really great, Michael. So you're talking about being so convicted in this vision yourself that your conviction rubs off on people and they're able to join you in the mission. And maybe these people are people who join you as employees, people who join you as funders, and they see your ambition and they're investing, yes, in the venture, but also in you. And I think another thing that you've mentioned that's important to note is building a portfolio and like a proof of concept, because as much as as founders, when we have these grandiose visions, our first go-to is, well, let me go get funding. But sometimes the funders want to see what have you done with what you have. And I always say this to entrepreneurs: start with what you have and where you are, so that when you go to funders and VCs and say, hey, I didn't have much, I was at Dartmouth, I was battling
Yeah.
I was battling to, complete my degree, but even then I used the resources that I had to build this. So imagine what I would do if I had more resources. And so there's that proof of concept in who you are as an entrepreneur and the resiliency that's needed there. So kudos to you. I see a hand from Joseph. Joseph, do you want to come off mute and ask your question quickly?
Yes.
Amazing. Go for it.
Thank you very much. I'm really inspired by your work. Michael, reflecting on your journey from Zambia to Silicon Valley, what were the key decisions and minds shifts that you believe will pivot to your success? How can an aspiring entrepreneur like myself apply those lessons in the context of today's rapidly evolving tech landscape?
That's a good one.
Yeah. I don't know if I got the question right, but I think the question is, what are some of the lessons?
I believe he was asking what the
Yes.
key decisions that you had to make to get to YC and the key mind shifts that you think an
Yeah,
entrepreneur will have to make in the process. Is that correct, Joseph?
Yes.
absolutely. Yeah.
Amazing.
Okay. Well, that's a good question, actually. Well, I mean, I can answer that question by talking more about my story. Some of the decisions that I was making and why I was doing, particular things. So I'm gonna answer that, Joseph. So the thing is that, right, I'll go back to founding the Mental Liberty Foundation, and I'll tell you more about the story, right? Because look, I was I reached a point where I was like, do I really want to become a doctor, right? Like, like I was like, what am I really interested in, right? Like becoming a doctor, like for me, I think was more about the impact, because I saw like some of the healthcare challenges in Zambia, they're like extreme, right? And like lack of access to drugs, all that kind of stuff. Um, but also like through the Mental Liberty Foundation, I realized that I could actually impact people without even having a degree. Like that was like wait a minute, like do I actually need to go to like medical school to impact people? Like I started thinking about like the pros and cons, right? And like if I become a doctor, I'd become a neurosurgeon, I would probably like perform surgery on like 200 people before I die. Or like Mental Liberty Foundation, like $15,000, 100,000 people. I'm like, wow, like this is actually more impactful. Um, and so I knew that okay, maybe I should actually explore more of this. So what happened is that the Mental Liberty Foundation allowed me to think about ways in which I could actually build stuff. And then I ended up founding another startup called Hive. Um, but the reason I founded Hive is because when I was, like when I was in Zambia, my mom's young sister, my auntie, may I saw her rest in peace. Um, I actually went to David Kaunda. Like she used to pay for my school fees using microloans, right? And like, disclaimer, just to point out, because I think that a lot of people think that a lot of successful entrepreneurs come from like wealth families, or like for you to come go to an Ivy League school, you actually need to be wealthy. Like I'm not one of those. But I like my mom used to pay like high school like using microloans, and I just thought about like how many people actually have access to these microloans. Like, can we actually give people microloans, right? And so I called my friends on like 24th October, and we founded this startup called Hive. The first goal was to really just like tackle financial exclusion by giving people like microloans, right? And we started doing that, while I was actually in college. So, at Dartmouth, you actually have like campus jobs. So we raised a little bit of money. It's like $1,000. We put money together, become $5,000. We started giving out some microloans in Zambia. We actually created one of the very first online lending institutions in Zambia. We actually got a license, and we started giving out microloans. Very interesting process. We like give a loan, like get collateral from that, and then we made some profits, and we got super ambitious. Like, we're actually making money. Like, we are gonna make billions of dollars. Like, let's try to scale this across the entire country. We scaled it, and we lost 90% of all the money. Like, literally, like we literally shut down the business. We're like, oh crap, like nothing is happening here. Like, we lost so much money, and like it's a very painful process. But I think that what really that sort of like process showed us that there's like tremendous opportunity to really build infrastructure that can actually allow other businesses to actually build on top of us. In particular, like it was very hard for us to perform KYC on like clients, like know your customer. We didn't have access to financial data. We didn't have access to like payment rails, like sending money and also like receiving money. Because remember, when you're giving out a loan, right? Like you're sending the cash, right? At the same time, people would have to pay like through a plan, right? And so they have to pay like periodically. And we had to like fight with people every time they try to give us back the money. But like there's no infrastructure in Zambia, that can actually allow that. Like we're seeing companies, some of our competitors like Lupia or like Paypod, like Isolons, they literally have to like fight with like clients, say, hey, you gotta pay the money back right now, right? So like tremendous opportunity in creating sort of like an infrastructure level type of business, B2B. That's what we're doing right now. So Ipahive pivoted, and we're now building like infrastructure that other fintechs can actually build on top of us. We just recently got the Bank of Zambia license. I'm on the board of Ipahive right now. My friend is running it as a CEO, and we're now backed by Microsoft, Nvidia, and actually Microsoft and Nvidia right now.
That is very exciting, Michael. If I can jump in right there, because again, I feel like you just dropped a nugget that I don't want us to run over, and I think it ties very directly to the question that Joseph asked, which is what are the mindset shifts that as an entrepreneur you need to have, and what are those key decision points, the critical junctures, if you will. So one thing you said is you have to be aware and curious, one, which is like understand what's happening in your surroundings. So you're paying attention to your mom and your aunt getting microloans to pay for your school fees. And then two, you have to be a problem solver. You are identifying what are the problems that your mom and your community is having in accessing these microloans. And that is the foundation of entrepreneurship, I find, is problem solving. Identify a problem, validate that it is a problem, right? Because in your case, you validated, you've seen it happen with your mom and with women in your communities. And then three, start building a solution, financial inclusion, right? So you come up with Ipahive, that's then helping build this solution. But then, like with any business, the key decision point and the mindset that's needed there is a mindset of pivoting and adaptability, because business happens. But it's also, I'm hearing a lot about if you want to scale as a business, you need to think of infrastructure, you need to think of systems, right? And if we give example of a Salaula, right? As a Salaula, I think Salaula is essentially a thrift store for those that are not Zambians, right? A thrift store where you have a small, maybe bench where you put some clothes on there, people come and bend, and we call it a bend boutique because they have to bend and, pick clothes. And there's only so much you can do with that one Salaula, with that one bend boutique, if you're not thinking of what's the infrastructure, what are some systems that I can put in place to do this scalably. So maybe those systems look like hire more people and do this in more neighborhoods, and have WhatsApp be a communication channel, aka infrastructure, that then this business is happening through. So I see a lot of those points, and I think they're aligning very much so with the question that Joseph asked, which is what are those pivotal moments. And so now you've pivoted to Ipahive being an infrastructure that's now B2B as opposed to B2C, as opposed to business to customer. And you've seen validation because now Microsoft is backing you up, and now you've brought Bank of Zambia on board as a client and all of that stuff. And so I think a lot of entrepreneurs, we're scared of pivoting because it is the unknown, and we're so attached. I think we're so attached to our story and the solution,
Yeah.
problem. Because like in your case, this is so close to home. This is something that you saw your mom and your aunt go through. So it's very easy for you to be attached to it. This is the problem that I set out to solve. This is the solution that I set out to solve, and I'll stick with it, even when the market is telling you otherwise. So maybe a piece of advice for entrepreneurs here that Michael is sharing is to not be attached to the problem and the solution. Be attached to your customers. What do your customers need? What do your target audience need? What is the market saying? And kind of adjust accordingly. I'll stop to take a question from Chansa, because I know Chansa has had his hand raised for such a long time, and I apologize. Chansa, please come off mute and share your question.
Thank you so much, Okwera, and thank you so much, Michael. You're such an inspirational young man. My name is Chansa. I'm right here in California. I'm the co-founder of ZISD, actually, with Chilwat Lungu.
Oh, nice.
He's mentioned you, of course, a lot, actually. Yeah. My question to you is, how can ZISD scale such that we can bring more people to the USA? Instead of bringing 10, we can bring maybe 10,000. Yeah. Then, yeah, sure. Then my second question is, I would like to invite you to see the ambassador, because he's coming to Sacramento, and he told me that, okay, listen, how can you help more young people in Zambia, and maybe create Silicon Valley in Zambia? So I'd like you to maybe hopefully come to Sacramento in July. That's when he'll be coming. Yeah, so those are my two issues, really. Thank you so much.
Two questions. Amazing. Michael, what do you have to say? I think in the interest of time, I'll try to have you keep the response brief to that one.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks a lot, Chansa. ZISD has, super hammered to be part of such an institution. ZISD has a tremendous impact. Pretty much everyone who's at Dartmouth right now went through ZISD. It's a very interesting thing. So I think that maybe with ZISD, maybe thinking about it from like an African perspective, like scaling beyond just Zambia. I think I see so much opportunity there. Pretty much, making it fully online, creating an infrastructure that can actually allow people to enroll online would actually be very, very cool. I've actually had conversations with Peter on this. That's something we're sort of like ideating. So it's very interesting. Yeah, I'm more than happy to meet the ambassador. I think there's so many people. Actually, I was talking to someone from Impact Capital Africa, and they were interested in sort of like collaborating, mentoring some Zambian founders, just making them see that, hey, you can actually build something that should be scalable, right? Like beyond Zambia. So more than happy to do that. Hopefully try to connect you via LinkedIn and all that.
Amazing. Thank you.
One more issue, sorry. One more question, sorry.
No worries.
Let me just add one more question, if you can allow me, please.
Yes, please.
Yeah, the last one is we have Barbara and Kundananji. So I would like to invite you as well for that football match. Maybe there you can meet other Zambians as well. We have it coming up in September. Nice. Yeah, so those two issues. Yeah, thank you so much, Alois.
More than happy to do that. I was actually talking to Inonge Kalustia a couple of weeks ago, and we're thinking about how we can actually interact with some of the other footballers that are actually coming to the USA. So yeah, really interested in that.
Beautiful. I have put in the chat Michael's LinkedIn that you can access him and ask him, bombard him with questions. Michael, if you're okay, can I put your email in the chat as well for people to reach out to you?
Yeah, we can use my personal email. Let's see.
Okay. Yes, just put that in the chat so that folks can ask you questions, because I know there's way more questions than we have time for. And with the 10 minutes that we have left, I want to focus on the meat of the game, right? Saving almost like the best for last, which is YC. So I'll have two questions for you, and I see there's still so many questions. We're most likely going to go over time because we are Zambians and we're Africans, and so there's African time at play here. And if it were up to me, like we could stay for the whole day, but folks will feel free to stay back and ask questions after. But I want to really focus on these two questions that I have for you, Michael. So You applied to Y Combinator twice while in college. You were rejected. Yes, yet you persisted, right? You applied again, and third time's the charm. And we've already seen this resilient spirit in you, which I absolutely commend you on. And if there's one thing that I will advise for founders to leave this room with is you need to be resilient. Like you need to be, some people will call it stubborn, and I call it persistency, right? They'll call it do one thought and do one thought. And like you need to be that way because that's the only way to kind of go through with entrepreneurship. And so so what did you learn, Michael, from these experiences where you keep applying and you're failing? So what motivated you? So that's one. And then the second one, even when you did get into Y Combinator, it is ridiculously competitive with an acceptance rate of less than 1%. So what has your experience been like there? I want us to give very practical like roadmap and blueprints to founders who are applying to Y Combinator so that they get an idea of what it's like to be in that accelerator, what it takes to be part of the 1% that's accepted in, and what are some challenges that you face. And then I'll package it with my last question, the third one, which is, so we know you've raised 500K from Y Combinator, but you've also raised an undisclosed amount of millions of dollars for Ocular AI from venture firms and angel investors. And now your company is actually valued at $20 million. And I don't really want to think of what that's like in Kwacha, because that's a lot of money, right? And so fundraising, what has that looked like for you? What has your fundraising experience been like? What do you think investors are looking for when making these decisions? I know you've touched on it lightly, but specifically in your case with the $20 million valuation, what has that been? And also people like, I just said he raised $20 million. Like, let's at least, give him a round of applause because that's not easy feat. You can react with that as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. So the thing is that, I kept applying to Y Combinator with Hive. By that time, we didn't even have the Bank of Zambia license. We kept first application we applied to was like, hey, we want to give microloans to everyone in Zambia. Like everyone should have microloans. Like, why not? Like we are like the best people to give microloans. We got rejected. And I was like, oh, why is it not working? Like we've done it, like proof of concept, right? And I think at that time when I was first applied to Y Combinator, when I got rejected, I was thinking about ways in which like where my life would be in the next couple of years. So I knew that I didn't want to become a doctor anymore, but I kept doing the pre-med anyway. I ended up finishing the pre-med requirements. But so I knew, okay, what's the next step? Like how can I actually be an entrepreneur, right? Like if I were to talk to an investor, I'd tell them like I should be an entrepreneur. For them to invest in me, what do they want to see? I knew that I had to have the credibility. I need to have the experience. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna work at Microsoft. I'm gonna try to apply for a job at Microsoft or Google, or like try to get some software engineering experience so I can actually tell investors like, hey, I actually worked at Microsoft and Google. So I ended up doing an internship at Microsoft. It was like a major switch. Like I was like super pre-med focused, but at the same time, I was doing like computer engineering and biomedical engineering. It was very interesting. Side story is that at Dartmouth we have like these crazy midterms. I remember writing like some organic chemistry class and jumping all the way into like an electrical engineering exam and like jumping back into like some chemistry exam. It was like crazy process. But anyway, the point is that I had to do like this major shift whereby, okay, I know I wanted to go to Microsoft and how am I going to position myself, right? So it was like a very cumbersome process applying to Microsoft. I think I practiced like over like more than 2,000 questions in like a month. So in my family, I have this bad reputation of pulling all-nighters like no man's business. Everyone hates that, but like I'm well known for that. So like 2 all-nighters. But anyway, I ended up landing an internship at Microsoft. As Microsoft, I had a great time there in Seattle. I built a recommendation engine that's currently being used by Microsoft. And after I graduated, after I left the internship, I ended up finishing my intern. Like the typical internship at Microsoft is 12 weeks. I did my internship in 8 weeks. I got a written offer right away and a promotion at the same time. So it was a very interesting time because when I went to Microsoft, I went like the higher position than most of my friends. So after graduation, I moved to Seattle to work for Microsoft as a full-time software engineer. I worked on cool products such as Microsoft Teams. Or if you guys have used Microsoft Word or Microsoft PowerPoint, the chances that you've probably used some of my code there. But it's an interesting time, you know. But when I went to Microsoft, I knew that, hey, why am I here? Why am I Microsoft? Like, I knew that was like a major, it was just like a stepping stone. Like, I knew that I didn't want to become like a software engineer for the rest of my life. I knew that I was using Microsoft as like a stepping stone to get the experience, you know, building like enterprise software and like moving somewhere else. So I kept applying with Y Combinator, obviously. I think summer, I got rejected from YC again with Hyperhive. And then a friend of mine, Louis, was like, we should apply with a USA company. He was working at Google. He was trying to leave Google as a software engineer at Google. And so we were like, yeah, let's apply for it. So we applied to Y Combinator, and we got an interview with Y Combinator. And we met this guy called Michael Saibo, who is like the founder of Twitch, pretty much the face of Y Combinator. And the first interview we had, he was like, this is such a stupid idea, because we applied with an idea and he didn't like it. He was like, this is a horrible idea. Like, he made us pivot right in the interview and told us to come back after 6 days. Like, that doesn't happen at all. Like, in most cases, like, you just be rejected. And like, if
so do you think Michael, do you think Michael Sebo, who we love, do you think he saw your potential as an entrepreneur and was giving you another chance to say, I want to invest in you, but this idea you're giving me is not the idea I'll invest in. So go back, come back with a different idea that I can invest in the idea and in you. Was that what happened there?
Absolutely, yeah. So what happened is that we applied with this e-commerce product. We're trying to build like some business operations for like e-commerce businesses, right? And like Luis and I had no experience like working in e-commerce. We were just like young like software engineers trying to build stuff, trying to get into Y Combinator. And so we get to the interview, and Michael Cyborg was like, this is such a bad idea. Like, it's like, you guys have no experience working in e-commerce. Like, why are you building this? And like, and I remember arguing with him. I was like, you know, like, yeah, like, you know, we've already signed a deal with like a Series A company in New York. Like, we're already building them a demo. And he goes like, I don't care about that. He was like, why don't you build something that you have experience in, right? Like, this is what comes out of the domain expertise of working at Microsoft. And I think one thing he liked about us that we were like very technical. Like, both me and my co-founder, we actually write the code. Like, we're super technical. He wanted us to build software that we can actually sell to other software companies, particularly like enterprise companies. And he told us to come back after 6 days with another different idea. So we literally dumped the whole idea and like went back, interviewed like lots of customers, lots of engineers and employees at like different companies such as Microsoft, Google, Boeing, you know, Amazon, all these kind of companies. And we noticed that, you know, there's a major problem what we're trying to solve, and that's how we ended up getting to Y Combinator.
That is beautiful. Okay, I know we're at time with like a couple of minutes left, and I know we're going to go over time. So I'll open it up for questions. I'll start with the ones that are in the chat because I know folks have been asking some questions here, and then I'll go to folks that have raised their hands. So let me see. Okay, so we've talked about the communication piece. One question was, okay, so someone asked about your ocular journey, which is what you've explained that Michael Sibo had you pivot while you were at your interview. And then maybe one thing that Manga asks that I would like for you to mention, because you said you meet Louis, who's from Google, and you decide that he's going to be your co-founder, right? So one of the challenges with entrepreneurship and with founding a startup is finding the right team, especially very early on. So what was that team selection process? Why was Louis the person that you would partner with?
Yeah, look, I think Louis and I, like, you know, we met at Dartmouth. We went to the same school, Dartmouth. We used to party together. We used to get drunk together. So like we knew each other, right? And like we literally bonded right away, right? And like he was like a year ahead of me at Dartmouth. So you know, he was like I remember like even before I came to Dartmouth, like I was talking to him, we're talking about how we're going like I'm gonna beat him in FIFA or something like that. So we had like common, and like we both used to like Amapiano. We actually still like Amapiano. So we listen to the same kind of music. So we just had that thing, you know. And we tried to work on an idea while we're Dartmouth together. We didn't end up building that. But like, I think one thing about Louis, he's like a daredevil. Like Louis is someone you tell like, hey, I want you to build this, and like you're gonna see it like following day. Like he's a crazy guy, like super smart. Which is why he worked at Google anyway. He's from Zimbabwe, by the way. He's a Zimbabwean guy who ended up getting into an Ivy League school as well. But I think with regards to just finding co-founders, I think that you should find people who you have like things, you know, in common. And I think that you should find the smartest and like the most ambitious people to work with. I'm like a very ambitious guy, and like Louis sometimes will be like, all right, like, you know, we understand your vision, but like let's break it down, right? Because for me, I'll be like, I want to take over everything, like let's do this, like let's deploy this and everything. And Louis is like, well, let's think about the technical infrastructure. I'm like, all right, like, you know, so I feel like we kind of like balance each other up, whereby you have someone who's like,
yeah,
someone who's like, all right, like let's. So like I think we work really well.
So I feel like co-founder matching is essentially dating, right? It's like you're dating someone who you get married to, and at some point you might divorce, or at some point you might have conflict, because we know one of the biggest factors of even companies going down is like co-founder separation. And so what you're telling us now is what you were looking for in a co-founder is someone who held the same value and the same vision as you did, one, but two, was complementary to you, whereas you were like the think big guy, like, oh, this is the vision, this is the ambition, we gotta do big. And then he brings you down to say, okay, we need to do big, but what are the actionable baby steps that we can take? So that complementary process, I really like that. Okay, so let me open the queue of questions in the chat. Actually, questions with hands raised. We'll start with Wamunima. If we can make our questions brief due to time constraints, please unmute yourself and share your question.
Good evening, or is it, I don't know what time it is where you are, but it's evening here. Just a quick one from me, and it's around the funding journey. So in terms of the funding journey, was there any expectation from investors in terms of how much capital you had raised at a particular time that is actually your own, so that they can actually see that you actually have some sort of a responsibility that you're bringing in to the startups that you're working on?
Yeah, no, so absolutely. The interesting thing, I guess the privilege of getting to a program like Y Combinator is that investors actually just love you. Like investors want to invest in like Y Combinator companies. And like Louis and I had so much to lose. Like background story, like Louis is from Zimbabwe. Like he went to Dartmouth and Google and quit his job at Google. Like this is a job like he'll make like $300,000 a year, right? Like I quit my job as well at Microsoft, right? Like we like quit like very prestigious like jobs to get into Y Combinator. So like they knew that, okay, these guys are really serious about this. And like Y Combinator has produced like companies like Airbnb, like Stripe, like DoorDash, all these like companies that are actually like changing the world in so many, even OpenAI itself, like to make ChatGPT is from Y Combinator, right? And so investors love Y Combinator companies because they want to invest in the next Coinbase, in the next Airbnb and everything. So with regards to that, you know, I think the good part as well is that when you get into YC, you get the $500,000. So when you go to an investor and you're raising cash, they know that Y Combinator has already given you $500,000, right? And so you got to tell them like, look, we've received $500,000 from Y Combinator. You know, they already know it's a big deal, but now we're raising additional funding to do this and that, right? So yeah, that's how we did it. So $500,000 and then raising more money, obviously millions of dollars for the seed round, and setting a valuation that investors think is reasonable, and then, you know, you raise on that. So yeah, I think that answers the question.
Beautiful. I love that Salifianji also mentioned in the chat that there's so many resources at YC Startup School. So I've put that link in the chat. I've also put the link to join the Okwera Academy community on WhatsApp, because someone asked if we can keep in touch and network on, you know, share resources. So that's already available. But Michael, what you've shared in response to Wamunima's question is the value of association. Like your network is your net worth, is essentially what you're telling us, and also the value of founders belonging to accelerators and belonging to companies that you can borrow credibility from. It's like social proof essentially. And so if you're in Zambia, for example, it might be more challenging for you to meet with an investor by yourself versus if you're associated with Bongo Hive, right, which has a connection with many investors that they can connect you to. So that's what has happened in your case. People just seeing that you're YC Combinator, that essentially like increases their likelihood of investing in you because there's that proof already. So look for my advice to people, look for accelerators or incubators that you can belong to, because in addition to the capacity building that you get from them, the networks that you tap into are almost invaluable. That's what has happened for Michael. Amazing. Okay, so Yengwe, maybe we go to you next.
All right. Thank you, Michael, for that wonderful presentation. So my question is, how do you build the entrepreneurial spirit? So I'm coming from a technical background, and over the past couple of months, I've been interested in entrepreneurship and stuff like that. So I wanted to find out if like just came naturally to you, or maybe you looked into some resources. And if there are some resources, I don't know if you'd mind sharing them with us. So that's my question.
Yeah, that's a very good question. To be honest, so the thing is that it's a very hard question to answer on my side. Number one, it can be both ways, right? You can actually learn these things by developing a habit of identifying problems and trying to solve those problems, right? Actually 3 ways as well. It can also be that you're an engineer. Like I'm an engineer myself. Like I'm an actual engineer, not just a software engineer. Like as an engineer, when you go to the engineering school, you're always like solving problems for people, right? So like the training itself gives that. But I think for me, I think for me it's kind of weird because like when I was a kid, like I was just a very super curious guy. And it's interesting because part of that comes from like academics. Like I was like super academically like obsessed and all that kind of stuff. And I think that it comes as a shock because like I think that because I've talked to many people, there's this notion that you actually don't need school to be an entrepreneur. You actually need it. Like and it depends on what kind of school. Like obviously we know like people like Bill Gates like dropped out of Harvard, but like Bill Gates is like a genius, right? Like at Harvard, like he was a CS guy, like he went to Harvard, like an Ivy League school. Like Mark Zuckerberg went to an Ivy League school as well. Elon Musk went to an Ivy League school. Jeff Bezos, like the thing is that what I'm trying to highlight is that I think the education really played a lot on my side, because it just helped me really think about things in like different ways, and in particular the Dartmouth experience. Like I was thinking about all these like solving problems from like a multi-dimensional perspective, really helped me think about things. So I think that education really comes in handy, especially when you're trying to build like venture scale businesses. Like we're talking about like real businesses, like if you're building something to do with like like logistics and supply, or like like grocery, you probably like okay, like grocery stuff you probably don't need that. It's like shops and everything, like you put stuff, but like you need some level of education though. But like if you're gonna build something as sophisticated as like deploy like generative AI in like large enterprise companies, like billion-dollar level type of ideas, you actually need to have that type of education to understand like things like compliance, to understand things like hallucination of like an LLM, like understanding like parameters, like how do you fine-tune an LLM, like how do you do this and that at the same time, like how do you manage finances, how do you communicate the venture capital. You need to have that, I think.
Yeah, that is such an important point that you make, Michael, a very profound one as well, because what I'm hearing you say there is to, as Yangwe asked, to build that entrepreneurial spirit, the entrepreneurial mindset. Like one, you need to be curious and be a problem solver, right? I think entrepreneurs are essentially problem solvers. But if you want to problem solve effectively, efficiently, but also analytically, that's where the education comes in place, because it opens your mind to different ways of thinking, different ways of doing things, and gives you broader perspective and dynamics to work with. And that's very much needed for building scalable businesses, but also domain expertise is important if you're building, like you're trying to build the next unicorn, right? The next Black unicorn, you need domain expertise, because as much as, because some people will argue that you don't need education as an entrepreneur because you can surround yourself with an educated team, but there's only so far that could take you, right? Because you as the visionary, you need to understand what you're talking about, so that even as you're bringing on board that team that is educated and expertise, you are still able to offer guidance to them because you have an understanding of what it is that you're talking about. So thank you so much for clarifying that. And then I'll go on to Richard Mulea for questions.
Well, thank you. I wanted to ask him how he figured out his company structure, corporate structure, and maybe also on the marketing side.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it, I guess.
That's a very good question, Richard. If Michael Saibo, you just know Saibo that, he would be like, you'd be actually shocked that when you apply to Combinator, like they don't even ask you that question, actually. like I remember, like I had like this VC tell me, like, what are your margins? And I'm like, this is a seed stage company, like what's that? So the thing is, one thing that this is a Silicon Valley type of thing that can be different, like African, venture capital firms and all that kind of stuff. And I've seen this like with Hyperhive, because we're trying to raise money for that. We need to have those projections. But like with me, with Ocular, like I think YC is really obsessed in like seeing like how big a problem you're trying to solve, and like what's the potential, like how big could this be, right? Like this could be the next billion-dollar company, right? Like, so the thing is that it's really hard to predict, like obviously the market size comes in when you look at the problem, right? Like if you're solving for like enterprise, like reason for us to really focus on enterprise is that enterprise companies spend more money on software. They actually have like lots of money to spend. And like if you're gonna make enterprise companies more productive, they're gonna spend money on it, right? So like there's a huge market there. Whereas if you're targeting like startups and everything, like startups usually die, like customers churn, all that kind of stuff. So that comes into play. But I think that with YC, I think it's all about the problem you're trying to solve and how big could that be. But I think with regards to the market, I think you gotta think about what, like how big could this be? I think the potential, right? Like how much money could you potentially make? So like with Ocular, for instance, like we are in pretty much an industrial revolution right now. Like everyone is looking to like adopt generative AI, right? But like doing that in the most secure and compliant way is a major problem. And in particular, creating something that's actually super customized for particular businesses, right? That's where we come in, right? So with regards to us, I think our market is pretty massive. Pretty much everyone would like to use Ocular, and we've seen these from like not just like large enterprise companies, but also like startups looking forward to adopting that. So I think just being able to identify a problem that's solving like a major, like a common problem among like many people, that should really help out with the market size.
Amazing. Thank you, Michael. I'll move on to Nsangu for your question, please. Nsangu, do we still have you there? Oh,
yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
I just had a little bit of a technical difficulty. My question goes to Michael. Being someone that's tried to implement a money lending system that is aimed at trying to solve one of the major problems that we have here in Zambia, is something that you've gone through and experienced, and that's something that I'm trying to achieve for myself. I have a relatively big dream that's aimed at trying to fix financial inclusion. And I wanted to get what your 2 cents is, what your take is, and what the major things that you would have done to maybe change the course of what happened initially when you did try it yourself. What were the most valuable lessons that you had learned? And if you were to do it again, what would you do differently?
Okay, I think that question goes to Hyperhive. So number one is that you need to realize that fintech is not child's play. It's very, very hard. Like, like you need to be regulators, you need to be compliant. It's like super, super hard and financially intensive. Particularly in Africa, you also need to be well connected. Because anyone can just shut down your payment system, and like you have to fight your way to do that. But I think that That's actually a very tough one to think about. I would say, look, I think that what's happening right now in Africa is that there's a battle between telcos and like banks, right? And like, if you can actually figure out a way of being like an intermediate, like an orchestration layer, that's actually really, really be helpful. Simply because there are lots of people who are underbanked, but like pretty much everyone has a mobile money account and they pretty much make transactions on the mobile money account, right? So think about it in that direction. I think from a fintech perspective, I think also at the same time, really, really like understanding the problem. I think we did pretty well on Hyperhive as a micro lending institution, but I think we got too ambitious in trying to scale the company too early. You should not do that. You should make sure that you actually only scale when you have product market fit. So which is PMF in itself. And you should only scale when you actually know that you have the resources to do that. For us, we didn't have the capacity. We didn't have the resources. We used to have people asking for loans, like people from like Okwera province asking for a loan. And like, this dude has like some collateral, and we'll be like, okay, we're going to trust them. And we give them money and they don't bring it back, and like we lose out on cash, right? So I think that I think that if maybe we had put in some systems in place to really mitigate sort of like that risk, would have been really helpful.
I really like that. I really like the part where you said we should only scale after you have the PMF, your product market fit, and when you have the resources to actually back up the demand that's going to come with the scale. Because the worst thing that could happen is you scale too fast, too quickly, and you can't meet demand, and then your reputation is ruined, and you only get one chance to do it right? And sometimes in the market. So thank you for making that clarification. Ingrid, I will pass it over to you for a question. Do we still have you here, Ingrid? Okay, I'll get back to Ingrid and maybe I'll pass it to Mr. Edgar.
Hi.
Oh, Ingrid,
Ingrid here.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry about that. Yes.
No worries.
Hi, Michael. It's just so wonderful to hear about everything that you have done, all your accomplishments. I joined in quite late, but I've just got a question that I would like to ask. So I'm building an e-commerce platform, and I pitched to one of the Canadian international angel investor groups, and they liked my idea, and they want to bring me to Canada on the Canadian startup visa program. So I will be incubated, and then so I need to undergo 12 weeks of online training, and then the rest of it I have to physically be in Canada to complete the entire incubation. So the program comes with a minimum funding of 75,000 Canadian dollars. So the challenge that I have is that I've been building everything on zero funds. So I'm literally I've bootstrapped my way and I have no money. So I find myself stuck because the program is actually a paid program. So with the 75,000 Canadian dollars, it will be kept in an escrow account where it's not my money, it's the company's money. So I need to find my way, into the program. So the program is 5,000 Canadian dollars. So I'm supposed to pay 2,500 upfront, and the rest after the 12 weeks of online training. And then there's also fees, immigration fees and tickets, and then there's also settlement funds to be able to live in Canada. How would you advise me to go about getting the funding that I need? Because I've created a crowdfunding platform. It hasn't generated anything. I've reached out to government organizations, and my head is just cracking. Yeah.
Michael, do you mind if I take this briefly as well?
Yeah, Absolutely. I was gonna say Justina is actually in Canada, so
Yeah. So Ingrid, I've put in the chat my email and my LinkedIn, but I'll also say like kudos to you, congratulations for getting this opportunity in the first place, but also for having what we've been describing as a resilient spirit in this conversation. Because many people would say, "Well, I have the opportunity, but then I have to find 5K. I don't have that money, so I'm not going to do it." So kudos to you for kind of pursuing it this way. I think depending on I've never heard of the organization that you mentioned, but feel free to message me and we can kind of brainstorm solutions. Because one of the things that we do at Okwera Academy is we want to connect you to the capital that you need to launch and succeed with your business, but also with your career. So we have funding from different funders, including the city of Toronto. And so we can see if there's a way that we as an organization can help, but also a way that even our community partners can support with that, or at the very least help with your crowdfunding effort. So we have every Friday we do a founder feature. We have a reach of like 4,000 folks. Many of them are investors. Many of them are community leaders in Canada and across the globe. And so every Friday, what we're doing is we're highlighting a founder, telling their story, and then giving specific asks to the community. And so maybe this is something we can do for you one of the upcoming Fridays. Share your story, share what support you need, and see whose ears it touches and kind of take it from there. But my information is in the chat. Feel free to reach out.
Yeah, you got it.
Thank you so much. This is really exciting. I'm actually getting goosebumps right now. Thank you so much. I'll be in touch.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Amazing. Okay, we go to Mr. Edgar for questions. I know we're running over time. Michael, I just want to make sure, do you have a hard stop?
No, actually, I mean, like, I have to go back to work soon, but no problem. I can take as many questions as possible.
Perfect. I don't have a hard stop as well. And I know folks.
Once a lifetime opportunity, you never know, right?
Exactly. So let's move with it. Grab your cup of coffee or tea or wine and let's roll with it.
Water right now, so
I have my water as well. Mr. Edgar, over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Great work, Michael. I think I've really been impressed with everything that you've achieved so far. I actually do not have a question, but I have a request. So I already sent you a DM on LinkedIn. So just wanted to make sure that that I get a response for that. But I also have a request for both of you, Michael and Justina. Is that how you pronounce it?
That is correct, yes.
Awesome. So I work with a fund from Shona Capital and the Cigar Family Foundation. And we invest in small growing businesses and startups across the sub-Saharan region. And we're currently eyeing the Zambian market. And so we're doing a bit of research, and I would just love to have a conversation with the two of you. On the other hand, we're also running an on-the-job training program for fresh graduates in Malawi. So that fits with what you guys are doing at Okwera Academy. So yeah, mine is just a request. If I could get that opportunity to have a conversation with the both of you.
Absolutely. Right off the bat, Mr. Edgar, I'm gonna send you my calendar on not Instagram, on LinkedIn, and we can schedule some time. Sounds like you're doing exciting work, and I'd like to explore synergies there.
Yeah,
awesome.
I typically receive like over like 20 messages on my DM every day on LinkedIn.
No, I understand.
Make sure I respond to that. There's people like asking questions, like trying to get jobs and all that. So like it's very, very busy DM.
I imagine. Yeah,
I imagine. Yeah, sure. Awesome. Thank you.
I'm just gonna stop for a second and say how beautiful this meeting has been. Yes, Michael sharing his story and so much valuable information, but also the networking that has been going on here. I really thank you guys for being such an engaging and an open crowd. And I know we have way more hands now raised. So I'm gonna go to Gilbert Mwalen and I can lower these hands.
Hi, Justina, and hi, Michael.
Hello.
Yep. Thank you very much for taking the time. I'm the gentleman in the chat who simply said I knew exactly everywhere Michael said he lived, because that is where my the office for my startup has been for the last 6 to 7 years. So yeah, so I'll give you a quick one. Pakangwa, around near there, at least you can have a reminder of that.
I know.
So thank you very much, man. I appreciate what this does for me is it reminds me to say that you can come from a place like that and be able to have that level of impact that you have done. And that, to a certain degree, in the last few years, we started feeling like maybe we're not headed in the right direction. Maybe we chose the wrong stuff. But this is a good picture to say, we need to keep on doing this. So my quick question is that, just like the previous speaker, I've already DM'd you, and please just take some time to respond to that when you have time. But also, what's your feedback on how do we approach this? Your validation route is that you had the opportunity to be in the university and create a story for yourself on how resilient you are in that direction with the people there, creating rapport with the people that are investing in you. How do you advise somebody that may not have the opportunity to do that, the period of living there and being able to create that rapport with people, but is coming from, like we have done right now with what the work we have done? How do we get into the US and be able to get partners in the same manner? What's the approach that you would advise around that?
Yeah, well, nice Kangwa people here. Well, so look, the thing is that so I was talking to someone from actually the managing director from Impact Capital Africa. So what they actually do is they partner with Zambian companies, and Zambian companies actually pitch their startups at Ciela Resort. I don't know if you know where that is. It used to be called Bonanza, and they actually get funding for that, right? But like the conversation we're having is that, like, I think that the problem was that the quality of startups and the ambition, the scale of ambition, was like a major problem with regards to like lots of Zambian startups. So I think that the point is that you should effectively, number one, communicate that this is like, it's an ambitious startup, like you're trying to build something beyond just Zambia, right? And like, look, the thing is that, like, when you talk about scale, right? Like, you should scale. Like, I think that this is what the problem is, because like, it's very interesting when you're actually in Zambia, you actually think that Zambia is like a huge country. It's like only 20 million people in Zambia. Like, California has got more people than that, right? Like, for you to build $1 billion company in Zambia, you pretty much have to scale. So, and this is the thing that YC looks for as well, right? Like, companies that have already demonstrated scalability. So I think that that's where the interesting thing comes in now. So you have to be able to communicate and say that I'm going to build $1 billion company that's going to be beyond just Zambia. We're starting with Zambia, obviously, but we're going to go beyond Zambia. So I think that that's more attractive to an investor side. I think that the resilience part is that, I mean, before the resilience, because obviously there's resilience, there's like speed of execution and like how big could this be? Like, you should also show them that you can actually execute things faster. Like, you actually move at the speed of light, right? Like, you can show that by maybe how much traction you've made with regards to like your customers. Are you listening to your customers? Are you shipping products at a very fast rate, right? So that can also be very attractive. But at the same time, running a business in Zambia itself is like very challenging. I think that it's all about communicating the fact that it's very challenging. There's no capital. That shows that you're super resilient. You've continued building the company for a couple of years, that kind of stuff, right? That stands out a lot. And also, just touching on your background as well, I'd say, try to figure out a way of communicating your background, with what you're trying to build. I think it really shines a lot when you think about it from that direction.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And Michael, I would add to what you shared, because we said even earlier, proof of concept, but also starting where you are and with what you have. So Gilbert, perhaps like look within the Zambian ecosystem? What are some organizations that you can align yourself with that would then open doors for you with this, like maybe US investors, US accelerators, etc.? So I know Bongo Hive is one of them, but even I share my story in a different meeting, in a different video, about how I came to Canada. I built my business here as well, and I ran a non-for-profit. A huge part of it was about volunteering, because that allows you to build your portfolio. So are there any other organizations that you can align yourself with that create that pathway for you? So I would kind of start there as well. And I will go over to Peter.
Hi everyone. Yeah, so my next question is, the first question is dedicated like specifically for Michael, but the question after that, like if there's anyone in the chat that has answers to that, please feel free to leave your answer in the chat. So yeah, this one is for Michael. So I'd applied to Combinator for summer 24, right? But I haven't yet received my rejection letter or interview. But I suspect I will get rejected because most of the people probably get the, that mass rejection on the 29th, and I expect to be part of that to be part of those people. But yeah, like I've always just been curious. Like after the 3-day, once like YC starts, there's usually a 3-day retreat. But after that, do you, like, now that I have someone to ask, are you guys like for the 3 months while during the batch, are you guys given free accommodation like in the YC houses, like, or maybe you have to pay for that? Like that has always been on my mind.
Well, YC is funding your business. You take care of yourself. Well, like think about it. Like VC are not like scholarship givers, right? Like they just fund your business, right? Like it's up to you, whatever you're gonna do. So with YC, they just give you pre-seed funding. You obviously have to give yourself a salary, right, from the money. So like the company is actually employing you, and so you pay yourself as well, right? But what typically happens is YC that you use the money, some of it to find your salary basically to get accommodation, and yeah, the budget itself is very, very okay. Another thing that I forgot to mention is that YC is very intense. Like the bar is very, very high. You have like these like dropouts from MIT and like Stanford, like Dartmouth dropouts, like they are like super ambitious. Like like even the founders of Stripe, like Stripe is like $1 billion company plus. They make like over $8 billion in revenue, like drop out of MIT, right? Like super ambitious guys. But like the bar is like super, super high. I used to think that you can build a startup just by relaxing. When I went to Y Combinator, I found that the bar is like super high and like things move very quickly, and you get to realize that the whole business world is actually pretty much alive. Your competitors are alive, your customers are alive, like everything is actually alive. And like every time you're thinking about your company, you got to think about your go-to-market strategy. You got to think about how big could this be. You got to think about security. You got to think about defensibility in the long run. You got to think about how much revenue you can make. When can you make the $100 million revenue? When can you cross that? How are you gonna hire? Like you have to think about all that at the same time. And like you have this group office hours whereby you meet other companies that are similar to you, and you're all sharing updates. So you see your friend making revenue, and you're like 0 revenue, and you're like, oh Christ, I need to work hard right now. And like your friend hits $1 million in revenue, and you're like, wow, like I should work hard. So that's the good part with YC. But I think that even beyond that, like Silicon Valley, like I have friends like who are making like millions of dollars like in revenue, like super, super successful guys like in Silicon Valley. Like it's a normal thing in Silicon Valley to make like millions of dollars, like billions of dollars. Like you can literally walk around like you walk around like with like just like walking around, like people are making lots of money and like you wouldn't even know that. So that's just the scale of ambition in Silicon Valley.
All right, thank you. One last question. So this one's just like dedicated to everybody that's on the call. So like how can I get funding in Africa? I've already applied to Techstars, YC, there's 500 Global. So like, are there any other accelerators that I can explore, that, because the thing that I'm currently building isn't something that's like restricted to Zambia, it's something like for the whole world. And I know like upfront in my pocket, I only have something like a 2,000 USD, and that can, even if I was to launch, man, like believe me, in 1 month, I would probably have to shut it down. So like, how can I get funding, or are there any accelerators anyone can recommend in the chat? Yeah, that's my last question.
That's
Thank
that's
you.
a very great question, Peter. Thank you. And I hope people share resources in the chat so we can curate them. But if I can go first and share some resources that I know. So like I mentioned, so first our newsletter, every Friday, we send you a list of curated opportunities, around 20 of them. There'll be funding opportunities, not restricted just to Canada, international funding opportunities in form of VC grants. So both, what's the word? So both diluted and non-diluted funding, events that are happening in the ecosystem, etc. And I see people dropping resources in the chat. So I recommend that you sign up for that newsletter. And so the other one, Peter, I'll say, so I know you mentioned Techstars. Please connect with me. My LinkedIn and email is in the chat because we have a very strong connection with Techstars here in Toronto. So I know, well, he's now their former managing director, Sunil Sharma. But the work that Techstars Toronto specifically does, they have a very huge interest in Africa. I think more than 50% of the founders that they invest in are from Africa. But unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you see it, that's almost always Nigerian founders. And like, we don't have a lot of Zambian founders in that mix. So if you're building something that you think would be exciting, please connect. Happy to make some introductions with Techstars and other accelerators. And then two other accelerators that I would like to bring to mind. I know someone mentioned the Zambia Business Angels Network, so that's a very good one. There's an organization called Nobel here in Toronto, and they do fund and incubate international startups with a particular interest in Africa and the Caribbean. So that's in the chat. So what they do too is they even have a pitch competition and Innovathon that's happening, I think in August. You don't even have to be in Canada to participate in that competition. I think they give about $10,000 non-diluted funding. And then the other one is Africa Impact Initiative. So I've added that in the chat. So Africa Impact Initiative is, it's born out of a collaboration between the University of Toronto and MasterCard Foundation, which MasterCard Foundation is another organization that you should be looking at on its own. I'll share more about that shortly. But what the Africa Impact Initiative does is, every year they invest in a selected number of startups in Africa. They have focuses every year. I think they focus on a different country. I know this year they have a specific focus in Zambia and Botswana perhaps, but also a general focus in the continent as a whole. So they give you funding, I believe, up to 25K, and they also bring their cohorts to Toronto every summer. So you incubate with accelerators at the University of Toronto, and you also go to Collision Conference. You go sometimes to Montreal for Startup Fest. They cover the cost of all of that. They do investor introductions, and I had the pleasure, because I was working very closely with Africa Impact Initiative last year, I had the pleasure of meeting some founders that came through that channel, one of them being Kondwani Ngulube. For those that know him, he's the founder of Shamba Data, an organization that recently got funded with the Zambia Business Angels Network, the one that Farron put in the chat. So these are some connections that I would be happy to facilitate, and other resources are added in the chat. I also mentioned MasterCard Foundation. MasterCard Foundation loves Africa. Okay, MasterCard Foundation loves Africa. I came to Canada on a fully funded MasterCard Foundation scholarship years back to the University of Toronto. And I know a lot of entrepreneurs, some who are building ventures in Africa, ventures globally, who've received about $300,000 from MasterCard Foundation. And so how this works, MCF has what they call an employee innovative fund or employee initiative fund. You don't have to be a MasterCard employee, but what people end up doing, say I'm a founder, I have a genius idea, I create my proposal and I give it to someone who works at MCF to present it on my behalf, and they get the funding through that. So I know friends who accumulated amassed 500K of funding from that. So those are some of the resources, but I will still acknowledge that there isn't enough information, I think, enough information and curation of the different opportunities that are targeted towards African founders, and we need to do better with that. And that's why we are curating this list. So if you have any more to add, please put that in the chat. But thank you, Farron and Salufianji, for adding those resources as well. So I'll curate them and share them in the resource email that I send after this meeting. Okay, I know I spoke quite a bit there. I will pass it over to Mike for questions.
Hi. Yeah, so I think most of the questions that I wanted to ask have already been answered. Yeah, so I'm also a startup founder. I'm building an e-commerce platform. It's a C2C and a B2C platform. So we're currently building our MVP. So I think the question that I wanted to ask was with regards to resources, and also if there are any other networking and mentoring opportunities that can be offered, maybe by those in the chat. Yeah, that would be greatly appreciated. And those that we would know, especially like from you who is in Canada and Michael. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you, Mike. Sorry, I feel like I missed. Was there a specific question that you asked, Mike?
Yeah, so the question was, but it's already been answered. So the question was with regards to resources in terms of like venture capital. Yes. So we are building an e-commerce platform. So we've been bootstrapping it. So we wanted to find out if there are any other opportunities that are there.
Absolutely. No, sounds good. I think this conversation highlights the need to curate all of these opportunities, because a lot of time things are very siloed, right? You don't have one centralized place to access all these resources. So definitely something we're working on. In the WhatsApp community that has just been created, the link is in the chat. I think we'll have one group that'll be dedicated towards resource sharing. You find something, online, just put it in there and let everyone have visibility towards it. But Michael, did you have a response to Mike's question?
Well, unfortunately, I don't really know some of the resources in Zambia because I'm operating in the USA. But I'll look into like Microsoft for startups or like Google for startups. They do offer like cloud infrastructure support. You can look into that. I don't really know the VC landscape in Zambia, but I do have peers from Impact Capital Africa. I think there's something called ZBAN, which is the Zambia Angel Network. And it's actually very interesting that you'd be very interested to know that there's actually lots of wealthy Zambians, the diaspora, who are actually looking forward to like investing in startups. Like I actually have them on my cap table with Ocular AI. Like I have some Zambians who actually wrote small checks to like Ocular AI. So there's actually lots of people who would like to invest in high potential startups. So I think just being able to utilize the network. I think you can find that like the ZBAN network or like Congo Hive, like Okwera, obviously, Microsoft startups, so Google Cloud. I think you get some support there.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. There's so many people, Zambians and non-Zambians, looking to invest in Africa, because Africa is the future. We know that, right? We know that we're birthing a population of youths that are entrepreneurial and innovative, and people are looking to tap into that innovation. And so the process is always, how do we streamline, how do we make it easy for people to find these founders, to find you guys? And so different organizations are doing this work, and you mentioned Impact Capital, Bongo Hive, and again, I can't emphasize this enough, and I know most of you probably came through Bongo Hive, and so you are familiar with the organization. But tap into that network, especially because it's a network at home. I know they run a lot of webinars on the ground, so tap into those resources available to you. Timmy, Aina, I know you've had your hand up for a while.
Hi, Justina.
Hi, Mark. And then we take 2 more questions. How's that, Justina?
Oh, yes. So after Timmy, Kainda, Marcus, that'll be it, so that we're done by 2 p.m. I know, Michael, we've taken a lot of your time, so we're just going to wrap it up with a few more questions. All day.
It's my lunchtime.
All right. I just want to say thank you, Justina, for this amazing opportunity as well. And I've learned a lot as well from listening to this conversation. So I have a question directed to Michael, because I joined when you were saying like, oh, initially you wanted to go to medical school, but you saw like the amount of impact you make is restricted. And honestly, I'm in that kind of phase right now. So I spoke to a mentor of mine, and he asked me, oh, why do you want to go into medical school? I was like, oh, I like helping people. And he told me like there are a lot of ways to help people. Like you can actually, and I'm also interested by nature. Like when I finished high school, I helped my dad manage his Toyota factory. I sold data airtime back home after I finished high school. And I'm currently in Canada studying biomedical science because I want to help people. They told me like, okay, you can actually get the funds and actually donate to the hospital as well. Like, actually doing the same thing you want to do. So I'm asking you a question like, how do you get yourself into like the tech space from being wanting to go to medical school to being in the tech space? So like, I want to ask that question. That's what I wanted to ask because in that dilemma, I know like I'm also like by the grace of God, like I'm smart academic, but like my personality, my nature is also sales oriented, right? So I have the nature of like being sales and like I have dreams of like empowering people because of my idea. But I also I'm kind of smart by the grace of God. But like, so I'm asking like, how did you get from being in the medical field to like tech to entrepreneurship?
Wait, are you from Nigeria?
Yes, I am.
I can tell. I got lots of Nigerian friends. But oh, I think that here's the thing, right? Here's where my thinking was. Number one is that look, first of all, all due respect to medical field, doctors are making tremendous impact. We need doctors. Some of my most, intelligent friends are doctors. They've gone on to do some really amazing things, coming out like top in their class at CBU at UNZA. So lots of respect, obviously. But in my case, I think that you have to know yourself, right? Like what kind of person are you, right? Are you like the kind of person who likes to follow traditional rules, or you like to break rules? You like to redefine things, you like to build stuff out of nowhere, right? Like I'm that kind of person, and I was looking at the I think that if I became a doctor, I'll be losing out a lot on so many opportunities. Number one is that I would spend so much time in a hospital trying to help people out when I could actually be an entrepreneur and build more hospitals and even employ more doctors to actually help more people out, right? So you don't necessarily you don't necessarily need to actually be the one doing the work. Sometimes you actually need to create a platform that can actually enable people to actually do more work. So like Pure Health, for instance, my third startup, like we are trying to like tackle like access to drugs, or like access to like healthcare professionals and everything, right? Like I don't need to be a doctor to do that. I create a platform that can actually allow doctors to actually do that. So somehow I'm actually like a super doctor, right? Like I guess, right? So but I think that the major point is that you should think about, like, you could be losing out on like a major opportunity by spending so much time in a hospital if you're really interested in not doing more things, right? Because like you could build the next $1 billion company, right? And like or you could wait for the government to employ you, right? So multiple things, but I think it all comes down to knowing yourself. Are you someone who is like have like crazy appetite for like risk? Like for me, I'm like a very risky, like I like to take risks, I I feel like the smartest, most technical people should be tackling the greatest challenges of our generation, whether it's in healthcare, whether it's tech and everything. Like we should be at the forefront, and I think that when you're young, like me, who is in the 20s, like you can take so many risks in life. If I lose $100,000 right now, like it's gonna hit me, but like it won't really hit. Like I don't have babies, right? I don't have like kids, so like I take advantage of that, but yeah, I think that I would critically think about it, especially because like from you already have the experience being an entrepreneur. It looks like you're kind of like in my situation where I was thinking about like I could be losing out so much, like like also being a doctor takes a lot of time, by the way. You're gonna spend so much time. I was gonna be a neurosurgeon. Like I spent like 4 years at Dartmouth, 5 years doing pre-med engineering, medical school, 4 years, being a neurosurgeon, like 7 years. I have to do fellowships 3 years for that. You could build a $1 billion company like in 3 years or 5 years. Like, like you could do all that, right? Like, so I think it all comes down to seeing the scale of your impact. You could probably impact more people as a software guy, building software for people. Still impact anyway, So yeah, I think more about that.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Just one more flow question.
Yeah.
Great answer. Thank you for the response. Actually, like it was very simple for me. So now you made the switch from being in the like medical field. Like how did you make literally like the switch from in science to tech? How did you get your foot in the tech space? How did you learn like the skills and coding, all of that? Like is there any advice you give? I know like there are a lot of what's the word? They're like they're let's say organizations that like actually help in like learning how to code and learn like tech about stuff. Like I'm just curious, like how do you like close like the science area and get your foot in like learn the tech and all of that?
Yeah. Well, look, for me, I was pre-med, right? But remember, I was a triple major in college, right? Like I was doing like pre-med, but I was also doing computer engineering and biomedical engineering. In fact, I actually have 2 degrees. I have a degree in biomedical engineering and computer engineering, right? So like I was doing things at the same time. So I was pretty much in all the fields, like so I knew what was happening in the healthcare space. I still know right now. I still know what the hippocampal formation is, but like the thing is that I think I was like because I knew that I was gonna reach a point where like for instance, if I studied like chemistry or biology, for instance, like if when I graduated, I would be like, oh my god, like now I have to like learn everything again, from like the tech side. So I think that I knew the level, the situation I was in, and I knew that I was gonna make some decision at some point. So I had to do it the hard way, right? I had to take everything at the same time. Not really ideal. Could potentially drive you crazy, but I mean that's the whole thing, right? Like you have to know yourself. It's pretty much. So people ask me like, people might argue right now, but like people ask me like, do you believe in work-life balance? Partly, I think it's good, but I don't believe in that. I'll give you a reason, right? I think that if you come from a place where you have everything, and like you have everything in life, it's okay for you to have work-life balance. But if you're starting from scratch, like you need to work 100 times more than more than your friends. Like it doesn't make sense for you to work 4 hours or 8 hours a day with the people who have already managed in life. They're working 8 hours, and you're trying to like go beyond that. Like you actually need to like cruise. Like you need to pull all-nighters somehow. So, but obviously you're gonna have like a point where you've managed to attain what you want to attain. Now you can have the work-life balance, right? So at this point, I don't believe in work-life balance. I work 16 hours to 18 hours a day, typically in a normal day. But that's because I know where I come from, right? And like same thing in college, like I knew that I was gonna make a decision. So my friends would take like 1 major. I knew that I'd take 3 majors because I know myself and I know that I have to make that decision at some point. Because it's interesting when you actually graduate, you get to see that everyone has got their own path. And like if you are following your friends and like now you're like, oh my god, like what decision am I gonna make? Like what are the parameters and everything, right? So you're pretty much screwed. So get yourself.
Yeah, it's the unfortunate reality sometimes of our positionalities as Africans and as Black folks. Like we need to work twice or even 100 times as much as anyone else. But also what you're saying to us, Michael, is like at some point you need to do what you have to do. So in the future you can have the luxury to do what you want to do, right? So something has got to give. But Timmy, we talked a lot about micro credentials. Maybe that's something that would be valuable in your case if you don't have the journey that Michael had where he's doing like double majors or triple majors. If that's not something that you're able to do or you're almost done with your bachelor's already, think of what are some other micro credentials that you can get that will help you get your foot in tech, because we've understood that education is an important piece there. Or if it's not micro credentials, let's look at transferable skills. What is a role in tech that is still aligned with the work that you've done in medicine? There's a lot of biotech companies that could still use your skill, and that gives you a foot in tech. Because when we think of tech, people always think you have to work a tech job in tech. Because Michael, your company needs maybe sometimes an admin assistant, right? They need someone in operations, they need someone in product. Like some of these roles are not so technical, but it is still working in tech. So kind of brainstorm it from that angle. Okay, I'll go to Kainda, and that'll be the last question we'll take, unfortunately, because we're so over time. We're like an hour over time, which has been fun, but would have to call it a day. Kainda, please go ahead.
I'll probably ask Bongo and Okwera to get me lunch.
You know what? Lunch on me, Michael. Give me your address and I'll Uber it to you today. Lunch on me.
Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, this is kind. Right now I'm on the road. Sorry for inconvenience.
No worries. So your line is breaking. We cannot hear you.
Hello.
kind of, maybe it would be helpful to post your question in the chat because your line is breaking. But in the meantime, how do we do this?
Can you get me now?
Yes, can hear you now.
Yeah, my question is, what time did you, how can you decide when to register your startup and also to leave maybe your current job?
Okay. That's a very good question, actually. I mean, it just comes to me again. So the thing is that, I mean, like, why, like, if you get into YC, for instance, like, you need to quit your job. And for so many reasons. If you're trying to build $1 billion company, you actually have to go all in. Like, you pretty much have to go all in. If you're trying to create a side project, it doesn't really, maybe you can just, you don't really need that. But like, if VCs are gonna pump in money in you, like 500K or whatever, you better work for that. So it really just depends on on what you're trying to do. But I think this is something to be very careful. I think that you should know what position you're gonna be in financially, obviously. Like Microsoft and jobs will give you like 300K, 250K, $1,000 a year. So you should know that if you're gonna give up that job, you better make more money at some point, whether it's now or in the future, right? So you want to think about that. But I think that I think that you should make sure that when you do the transition, you actually are in a better position. I think that it's part of the ingredient, though. Actually, like quitting a job and like trying to like do something really crazy. Like, I feel like for you to actually become really successful, you need to be in a desperate position where you know that you actually have so much to lose if things don't work out. So you're gonna work so hard to just make it work out, whether it's gonna pivot or whatever stuff. Like, you're like, oh man, like I can't let this go. Like, so you're gonna work super hard. Whereas I think that there's a level of reluctance that you actually have when you're building a company and you have another job, because you're like, oh, I can, like, if it dies, like, I don't care, I have another job, like, I'll just
To go back on.
exactly right, exactly right. And it's good to have a plan B. In myself, I don't like to think about plan Bs. I like to think about plan A, even though I would definitely have plan B, C, and D. I'll have them, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna forget about that. I'm gonna focus on plan A. Like, this has to work, and I'm gonna go like all in it. So I think that really helps.
Yeah, no, I agree. And especially like if you're bootstrapping, there's value in having your job and have that only be like a source of capital to fund your business, not like your safety net,
I agree with that, Justina. If you're bootstrapping, you don't need that. But like, if you want to reach like venture scale, you need to, you might, because like venture, like these guys are also working, right? Investing in you is their job. Right?
Exactly. So Oh, okay. This has been nothing short of amazing. This has been, Michael, I can't thank you enough. I'm so serious. I'm going to DM you right after this. I'm getting you lunch, and I really appreciate you spending a couple of hours of your day. You're very busy.
I only eat seafood, by the way. I only eat seafood. I only eat hotel 5-star seafood.
Whatever it is that you eat, let us treat you to lunch today. But honestly, this has been amazing. So thank you for giving us such valuable insights, for being vulnerable and telling your story and making sure we know that it's not all roses, because it's easy for people to, it's not all roses, right? So for being very transparent and very insightful, really appreciate it. And the audience, you guys have been amazing too. You've been very interactive. You brought very thought-provoking questions and really appreciate that. So I'll pass it over to Farhan from Bongo Hive to give some closing remarks. And then afterwards, I'll have people, like, if you don't mind, just turn on your cameras for a second. Let's take a nice selfie and commemorate this day, so that when you become millionaires, you don't forget that, you had this conversation with Okwera Academy and Bongo Hive and Michael, and we'll take a mini selfie. But Farhan, over to you.
Wait, I think just
In closing, I just want to say thank you to everybody, and most importantly, thank you to Okwera Academy. This was beautiful, and I think it's amazing to just see how much potential and how much people are just hungry to just get out there and build groundbreaking solutions. Like you rightly said, as Bongo Hive, at our heartbeat is entrepreneurs and providing the support that entrepreneurs need to grow and become the billion-dollar ventures that we know they can be. We have a series of events that are coming up, and everything that we do, from webinars to physical events, is just really meant to support the entrepreneurs. So again, I just want to encourage you to interact with us on our various social media platforms and our website. We post all our updates there. If you subscribe to our newsletter, you're also able to note what opportunities are available within our ecosystem, but also you're able to know what events are coming up and which partnerships, like this particular one, that you can be a part of. But yeah, thank you so much. And I'm really excited to see what comes after this amazing conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you, Farron. Thank you for facilitating this and bringing over the Bongo Hive crew. A lot of folks here from your introductions and your facilitation. So thank you. Someone says there's no power because we're suffering with load shedding in Zambia. But if you can please help us, turn your camera on, and then I'll take a quick screenshot and picture just for our records as well. I'll wait a couple of seconds.
I actually have two last remarks.
Oh yes. Please give remarks while people are turning their cameras on.
Yeah, so I think that, number one, to be honest, being an entrepreneur is a very complicated and very challenging endeavor. It's super challenging, and I always get shocked when I actually see lots of people like having so much time, and I'm like, how do you have so much time? Like, it's so hard to build a company. Like, it's super hard, and like it's gonna like really like obviously there's always like something to lose. Like, I mean, in terms of like maybe your personality is gonna get screwed up or whatever, but like, the point is that it's very, very challenging, and like it's not as easy as it seems. And I think that there's lots of people who try to make it look like it's very easy. It's very hard. You should know that. You should actually embrace that. And like another thing is just to be like, you gotta be super stubborn, and you have to be pretty flexible, because remember, like, business world is very dynamic, right? Like, the factors that will enable your business to work today might not necessarily be the factors will enable business to work. So like, as a founder, you should be able to like navigate your business in real time, right? So you should embrace pivots. You should think about you should strategically think about how you're going to position your company in a better place, right? But I think at the same time, I think that you should actually work super hard. I don't believe in work-life balance, especially as an entrepreneur right now. I think that you should work extremely hard, and it's for a particular reason. That's why you have other companies make it, other companies don't make it. It's because people work super hard. If you're gonna put in 100 hours a week, and your friends are putting 50 hours a week, you can do twice the amount of work. I think I'm stealing this from Elon Musk, by the way. But like, if you put in like 100 hours of weeks, right, like 100 hours per week, you're pretty much doing twice as what someone would actually do in like 1 week, right? Like, you do that in 2 weeks, right? In 1 week. So I think that you should actually work super hard. You should actually work super hard, which is why when you become an entrepreneur, you should actually know that that is what you want to do. Because the moment you do that, you actually know that you actually have to work hard. It's gonna be super hard. It's gonna be super challenging. That's the whole point. That is the whole point, exactly. Like, the whole point is going to be hard, right? But yeah, it takes a lot to really build something that's crazy, and it's gonna take a lot. So yeah, wish you all the best, and yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you, Michael. Thank you for those remarks. And yeah, I can't say enough thank yous, honestly. Like, even me here moderating, I've learned so much from hearing your story, and you've just deposited so much encouragement in me. So thank you. Okay, on that note, I will call it a day. Thank you for allocating 2 hours of your Friday in Jakarta to sit with us here today. And I wish you a great weekend. Please expect from us next week a recording of this video, so you can have it for your records, and also some resources, all the links that have been shared in this chat, how to get in touch with Bongo Hive, how to get in touch with Michael. All of that will be packaged nice and pretty for you, and will be delivered to your inbox next week. But thank you, and I'm gonna take the screenshot now. If you wanna say cheese or say Zambia Kuchalo, so I can take a screenshot. Okay, there we go. Perfect. Thank you guys. Thank you so much. You have a great evening, a great day, a great morning if it's still morning where you are. And we'll be in touch. And God bless you all. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot, Justina, and
Thank you.
Google Hive team.
Thank
and
you very much.
All right.
Thank you. Bye.
Right. Oh, I forgot. I forgot something.
Michael, can you take one quick question?
Yeah, sure.